The spiritual warfare ceremony that Kun Somchai had organized was more magnificent and powerful than anything our village had ever witnessed. The sacred fire burned with supernatural intensity, reaching toward the star-filled sky with flames that seemed to possess their own consciousness. The entire community had gathered in protective circles, their voices raised in chanting that created harmonics powerful enough to make the very air vibrate with spiritual energy. Yam lay in the center of the innermost circle, surrounded by blessed thread that glowed with protective power and covered with amulets that had been consecrated by monks from 7 different temples. To anyone watching, it appeared to be our final desperate attempt to save her life through traditional spiritual warfare. But as the ceremony reached its peak intensity and the sacred fire blazed higher than ever before, Kun Somchai caught my eye with a look that carried meanings I didn't immediately understand. His weathered face showed not the focused concentration of someone leading a spiritual battle, but something else entirely. A mixture of determination and secret knowledge that made my heart race with sudden hope. Without speaking, he made an almost imperceptible gesture toward the path that led back to our house. When I looked questioningly at him, he nodded slightly and then did the same to mother and father. It was clear that he wanted us to follow him, but the reason remained mysterious. "Trust me," he whispered so quietly that his words were barely audible above the sound of the community's chanting. "The real battle is about to begin, but not here. Not in the way that our enemy expects." His words filled me with confusion, but also with a spark of hope that I hadn't felt in weeks. If Kun Somchai had been planning something beyond the spiritual warfare ceremony, something that might actually save Yam's life, then perhaps our situation wasn't as hopeless as it had seemed. We followed him away from the ceremony, moving quietly through the darkness while the rest of our community continued their spiritual battle around the sacred fire. As we walked toward our house, I could hear the chanting growing more intense behind us, the voices of our neighbors and friends raised in desperate prayer for Yam's salvation. But it was what we found waiting at our house that made me realize the true scope of Kun Somchai's planning. Standing in the shadows near our front door was an elderly man I had never seen before, his presence both commanding and somehow otherworldly. Even in the darkness, I could sense that this was someone who possessed knowledge that went beyond ordinary human understanding. "This is Uncle Foot," Kun Somchai said, his voice carrying a mixture of respect and relief. "He has been waiting for the right moment to help us, and that moment has finally arrived." As Uncle Foot stepped into the light cast by our house's oil lamps, I could see that his weathered face bore the scars of someone who had spent decades confronting supernatural forces. As we gathered around Uncle Foot, Kun Somchai began to explain the true nature of the plan he had been developing in secret for days. "The ceremony you just witnessed is a decoy. Everything, the sacred fire, the community gathering, the spiritual warfare preparation, all of it is designed to convince Yai Chue's spirit that we are attempting to fight her using the same traditional methods. But Yai Chue has grown too powerful for conventional spiritual warfare. She has spent weeks feeding on Yam's life force, building her strength and establishing connections to our world that go far beyond what any living witch could achieve. The dead have advantages that the living cannot match, and she has learned to exploit every one of them." The implications of his words hit me like a physical blow. You mean the ceremony won't save her? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. All of our community's efforts, all of their prayers and spiritual energy, it's all useless? Kun Somchai's expression was both compassionate and determined. Not useless, essential. The ceremony serves a crucial purpose. It focuses Yai Chui's attention on what she believes is our primary attack, allowing us to execute our real strategy without her interference. Uncle Foot has been studying cases like Yam's for decades, he continued, gesturing toward the elderly shaman who had been listening to our conversation. He understands that supernatural entities like Yai Chui require physical anchors to maintain their influence in the world of the living. Somewhere in our community, she has built something that allows her to cross between the realm of the dead and our reality. Uncle Foot stepped forward, his ancient eyes studying each of us with an intensity that made me feel as if he were reading the very contents of our souls. The sacred fire burning at the ceremony is indeed powerful, he said, but its primary purpose tonight is to serve as a beacon that draws the dead witch's attention away from what we're about to do. I need to find her anchor, the physical manifestation of her spiritual influence that she has been building while your daughter wandered in her possessed state. Once we locate and destroy it, we can sever the connection between Yam and the dead witch. The dead witch has been using your sister's unconscious wandering to build something, he explained as we moved through the darkness around our house. Every night during Yam's sleepwalking, she followed spiritual compulsions that led her to the construction of an anchor for Yai Chui's influence. But to find it, I need someone who shares a deep spiritual connection with your sister, someone who has been present during her supernatural experiences and has developed sensitivity to the same spiritual forces that have been affecting her. His ancient eyes focused on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle with otherworldly energy. You, he said simply, you are the one who has been saving her, finding her during her wandering episodes, and maintaining the connection between her true self and the world of the living. You have developed a spiritual sensitivity that will allow me to find what I'm looking for. The responsibility he was placing on me was both terrifying and strangely comforting. Throughout Yam's ordeal, I had often felt helpless, unable to protect her from the supernatural forces that were claiming her life. But now Uncle Foot was telling me that my constant presence during her possession had given me abilities that might be crucial to saving her. He told me to take his hand and stand in the exact spot where Yam usually slept. Then we would both close our eyes for a moment. Are you ready? He asked, his voice so firm it sounded as if he had done this countless times. I'm ready, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure what would happen. Then let's begin. We both closed our eyes as the community's chanting grew louder behind us. After only a few seconds, Uncle Foot opened his eyes and walked outside. Curious, we followed him. We made our way across the property until we reached the dense bamboo thicket behind the house. As we drew near, I felt a wrongness emanating from the tangled growth, a spiritual corruption that made my skin crawl and sent my heart racing with instinctive fear. Here, Uncle Foot said with grim satisfaction. This is where she has been building her nest, her physical anchor to the world of the living. I can sense it. Uncle Foot studied the bamboo thicket with the focused intensity of someone who understood exactly what lay hidden within it. The wrongness I had sensed seemed to pulse stronger as he approached, and I could see that even his weathered face showed the strain of confronting such concentrated supernatural evil. The anchor is deep inside, he said, his voice heavy with the implications of what we would have to do. It has been growing and strengthening for weeks, protected by the density of the bamboo growth. To destroy it, we must first expose it completely to the open air and spiritual energy. Father understood immediately what Uncle Foot was asking. You need us to cut through the bamboo, he said, his voice showing the grim determination of someone who knew that desperate times required desperate measures. Uncle Foot nodded gravely. But be prepared for what you will find, he warned. The dead witch has been using your daughter's unconscious wandering to build something that defies the natural order. What lies within this thicket will challenge everything you think you know about the boundaries between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. With machetes from the tool shed, Father and my brothers took positions around the perimeter. Stay back, Father told Mother and me. We don't know what will happen when we disturb whatever is in there. Mother and I both nodded, our fingers entwined, bracing for whatever might emerge. As Father and our brothers hacked through the dense bamboo growth, cutting away layers that had been undisturbed for years, we gradually revealed something that should not have existed in our world. The supernatural nest that Yai Chui had been building was a mass of gelatinous, resin-like substance that seemed to pulse with its own malevolent life. Mixed throughout this otherworldly material were dry bamboo leaves, small animal bones, and other organic matter that had been arranged in patterns that made my eyes water when I looked at them. But most disturbing of all was the stench that erupted from the supernatural construction when it was exposed to the night air. It wasn't just the smell of decay or corruption, it was something fundamentally wrong, as if the very molecules of air around the nest had been transformed into something toxic to human life. Several of us had to step back, covering our faces and fighting waves of nausea that seemed to come from spiritual rather than physical sources. Uncle Fudd studied the horrible mass with the clinical detachment of someone who had encountered similar supernatural constructions before, but even his weathered face showed the strain of confronting such concentrated, otherworldly evil. This is how she has been maintaining her connection to the world of the living, he explained, pointing to specific patterns within the gelatinous substance that seemed to shift when observed directly. Every night that your daughter wandered here during her possession, she was unconsciously adding to this construction, strengthening the dead witch's ability to affect your family and your entire community. The anchor has been growing more powerful with each passing day, which is why the supernatural activity has been intensifying. Exposing the nest to the sacred flame's spiritual energy will damage the link between the dead witch and your daughter, but destroying it completely will cause tremendous spiritual trauma because part of Yam's life force has been integrated into this supernatural construction. The weight of Uncle Foot's words settled over our family like a suffocating blanket. Mother's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sob as she realized that even our desperate gamble to save Yam might end up killing her. I felt my own heart sink as I understood that there was no guaranteed path to safety, no certain way to rescue my sister from the supernatural forces that had claimed her. Father's face showed the agony of a parent forced to choose between terrible alternatives. If we don't destroy it? He asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. She dies slowly as the dead witch continues to drain her life force, Uncle Foot replied with brutal honesty. But if we destroy it, the spiritual shock might kill her instantly. There are no safe choices left, only the hope that her spirit is strong enough to survive the trauma of severing the supernatural connection. For what felt like an eternity, Father stood frozen between two unbearable choices, his weathered hands trembling as he wrestled with a decision no parent should ever have to make. I saw the war behind his eyes, the desperate love of a father locked in battle with hope and despair. Mother reached for his hand. Her touch offered no guidance, only the quiet solidarity of someone who knew this burden could not be shared, only witnessed. The decision Father made in that moment was one that would haunt him for the rest of his life, but it was also the only choice that offered any hope of saving Yam. Do it, he said, his voice breaking with the weight of what he was asking. Burn it. Whatever happens to her, at least she'll be free of that thing's influence. Uncle Foot nodded solemnly at Father's decision, his ancient face showing both respect for the courage it had taken to make such a choice and sorrow for the pain it would inevitably cause. Without another word, he retrieved a container of gasoline that he had brought with him, moving with the deliberate precision of someone who had performed similar rituals before. Therefore, as Uncle Foot prepared to destroy the physical manifestation of Yai Chui's supernatural power, and we braced ourselves for the consequences, I understood that we were taking the most desperate gamble of our entire ordeal, and that the next few minutes would determine whether our family would survive intact or be destroyed. The destruction of Yai Chui's supernatural nest was unlike anything I had ever witnessed or could have imagined. When Uncle Foot poured gasoline over the gelatinous mass and set it ablaze, the flames that consumed it burned with colors that don't exist in normal fire, deep purples and sickly greens that seemed to absorb light rather than produce it. The smoke that rose from the burning nest was thick and oily, carrying scents that made us dizzy and disoriented. But more disturbing than the physical effects was the spiritual energy that was released as the supernatural construction was consumed. I could feel waves of otherworldly power washing over us, as if the destruction of the anchor was sending shockwaves through realms of existence that human senses weren't designed to perceive. But most terrifying of all was the sound that came from the direction of the ceremony, Yam's scream. It rose to a pitch no human vocal cords should be able to reach. Even from where we stood, her raw agony carried to us as the spiritual tether binding her to the dead witch was torn apart. We have to get to her, I said, the words torn from my throat by desperation and fear. She's in pain. She needs us. We can't leave her alone during this. Without waiting for instruction, I began running toward the ceremony site, my heart pounding with terror at what we might find when we reached her. Mother and father followed immediately, their parental instincts overriding any other considerations as they raced through the darkness toward their daughter's cries of agony. Behind us, Uncle Foot and the others followed as quickly as they could, but I was focused entirely on reaching Yam before whatever was happening to her caused permanent damage. When we arrived at the ceremony site, the scene that greeted us was both heartbreaking and terrifying. Yam lay in the center of the protective circle, her body convulsing with such violence that the villagers who had been maintaining the spiritual warfare were afraid to approach her. The sacred fire that had been burning so brightly throughout the evening was now flickering erratically, as if the spiritual energy that had been sustaining it was being disrupted by the supernatural trauma Yam was experiencing. I rushed to her side without hesitation, kneeling beside her convulsing form and trying to find some way to comfort her or ease her pain. Yam, I called, my voice breaking with emotion. I'm here. We're all here. You're going to be okay. The connection is broken. You're free. But my words seemed to have no effect on her condition. She continued to writhe in agony, her eyes rolled back in her head, showing only white, her breathing so irregular that I feared she might stop altogether. In desperation, I did the only thing I could think of. I gathered her into my arms, holding her convulsing body against my chest and whispering words of love and comfort that I hoped could somehow reach through the spiritual trauma she was experiencing. And then something extraordinary happened. The moment I embraced Yam, the world around us seemed to fade away, replaced by a realm of pure white light where only the two of us existed. In this otherworldly space, her convulsions stopped, her breathing became regular, and her voice filled with the clarity that I had missed so desperately during her sickness. Sister, she said, I can see everything now. I understand what happened to me, what that thing was trying to do, and why you fought so hard to save me. The dead witch, she continued, her voice filled with a mixture of sadness and gratitude. She was feeding on more than just my life force. She was trying to use me as a gateway to reach our entire family, our whole community. If you hadn't fought her every step of the way, if you hadn't kept finding me and bringing me back every time I wandered away, she would have succeeded in claiming all of us. The knowledge that Yam understood the full scope of what we had been fighting filled me with both relief and heartbreak. But we stopped her, I said, my voice breaking with emotion. Uncle Fut destroyed her anchor. The connection is broken. You're free now. You can come back to us. You can live the life you were meant to have. Yam didn't respond, as if she had something to say but was afraid of hurting my feelings. Hey, let's have our morning walk to school like we used to. You love it, don't you? You want to go to university, don't you? I stammered, shaking her, saying anything I could to get a response. Yam's voice was filled with love and infinite sadness as she looked into my eyes. Sister, she said gently, I'm dying, but I'm not afraid because I know that what we did tonight saved everyone else. Even here, in this otherworldly realm, the tears on my cheeks felt warm and real. I don't want to lose you, I whispered. I don't know how to live in a world without your laughter, your curiosity, without the future you dreamed of. You were meant to stay, to build a life and a family of your own. It isn't fair. Life isn't about fairness, Yam replied with wisdom that seemed far beyond her 14 years. It's about love and the willingness to sacrifice for the people who matter most to you. You taught me that, sister. Every time you saved me, every time you refused to give up on me, you showed me what real love means. Her words hit me hard. A mix of despair and a desperate need to keep her close swelled inside me, making it impossible to speak clearly. All I could do was mumble as I cried frantically. Sister, she said, I'm leaving. The white realm around us was fading rapidly, and I could feel the physical world beginning to reassert itself. But Yam's final words carried a weight and clarity that would remain with me for the rest of my life. And then she was gone, her spirit released from the supernatural bonds that had claimed her, her body finally at peace after weeks of otherworldly torment. The sacred fire that had served as our decoy burned quietly now, its purpose fulfilled, while our community gathered around us in respectful silence as they realized that our desperate gamble had succeeded in breaking the dead witch's power, but at the ultimate cost. Therefore, as I held Yam's soulless body, I understood that our battle against supernatural evil had ended not in victory or defeat, but in a sacrifice that had saved our entire community while teaching us that love truly is the most powerful force in any realm of existence.